Hello, my name is Darren Zupke, and I'm here with Howard Dan. He's the owner of Howard's Reeds and plays professionally on the French bassoon in the UK. And we're going to talk about the 1979 recording of Jean Françaix's Concerto for Bassoon, performed by Gilbert Audin, solo bassoon of the Paris Opera and professor at the Paris Conservatory. So thank you, Howard, for joining me. If you wouldn't mind,
Pleasure.
please share a little bit about yourself and your experience with the French bassoon.
Sure. Well, my experience with the French bassoon is really tied very much up into my whole background and my upbringing. It kind of began before I started learning the bassoon. It came from my father, who was a music teacher and a bassoon player.
Oh.
And he taught me the bassoon. We would go on family holidays, which involved trips to IDRS conferences.
Wow.
So there was one particular one that stands out. It was in Rotterdam in the Netherlands. And one of the artists was, in fact, Gilbert Audin playing the Françaix Concerto. And it was also conducted by Françaix.
Wow. And that's actually the recording that we're going to listen to. It's a studio, right? But it's still directed by Jean Françaix.
It's the same group of people, yeah.
Wow.
But I didn't realize at the time really what I was watching and what it, what that actually meant for me, in terms of, goals to aim for and all of that. At the time, it was just like, oh wow, this is just another concert that my dad's taking me to, And it used to get played in the car as well all the time. So we'd end up singing it and driving along to school or whatever. And it was, it just became the soundtrack really to everything.
Wow. To have a bassoonist dad, that's amazing.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I guess it was probably quite difficult for him because he obviously had this huge passion for it. But I think he was also very careful not to try and push me, into becoming a bassoon player. So
right.
in a way, I probably could have done with him being a little bit stricter in a way in my later years, but I probably wasn't that easy to deal with, I'd imagine, when I was a teenager. Yeah, another thing he took me to, in fact, was a British Double Reed Society event. Again, one of the artists was Gilbert, and I was a bit older at this point. I was about 16 years old. So I was playing, pretty okay. And I signed up to do the masterclass with Gilbert. And just before the masterclass, he did a recital where he played the Allard Paganini variations.
Wow.
And so I just essentially watched my hero play this incredible piece, and then I went into this room to do a masterclass with him, and I completely froze and played probably the worst I've ever played. So it was like a dream and a nightmare at the same time. But bless him, he gave me one piece of advice going away from that. And it was play everything as loud as you can possibly play it from now on going forwards.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah, so, I mean, reading into that a little bit, I don't think he actually meant, always just blow your guts out with the bassoon, but he wanted to push that side of what I was doing, because I had not appreciated the physicality that went into playing the French bassoon.
Right.
It's a lot more resistance, and he, I mean, when he played next to me in the masterclass, he played a phrase that I just played, and the whole room filled with this unbelievable reverberation, and my sound in comparison just felt like this tiny little, blowing down a straw, and and I could see, because I'd never seen him close up playing. I mean, this concert when I was a kid, I was, way up, and when I was standing right next to him, I could see, the physicality, and the amount his neck was expanding, and it was really, an eye opener for me. And I went away from there, and I really tried to follow that advice. one memory that sticks out there of a masterclass I did when I was about 14, and it was with Bill Waterhouse. It was in Colchester, a small town not far from where I grew up, and I'd never met him, but I'd obviously heard of him, and I walked up onto the stage, and he looked at my instrument, and he said, "Oh, a real one."
Wow.
Yeah, so that was
That's
his
quite an
take.
endorsement.
Yeah, absolutely. So that, I mean, that what a great reaction to, to seeing a French bassoon.
Yeah.
So in the local orchestra in my town, I played with my father and also two other of his students. So
Oh, wow.
we were a section of 4 French bassoons.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah, I looked into actually studying in France.
Uh-huh.
I sent off all the brochures of the conservatoires,
Mm-hmm.
and I received them all. And obviously, I mean, it's obvious, but they were all written in French.
Right.
And I wasn't really very capable as a linguist, and so I was very daunted by the prospect of going to a foreign country where I didn't speak the language, and sort of trying to learn the bassoon when I sort of thought I'd probably spend more time trying to learn French and how to work out what I was doing, and
Yeah.
so I ended up deciding to audition for music colleges in the UK. So I'd one of the places I went was the Royal Northern College of Music, and at my audition there, they spoke to me and they said, "We're going to offer you a place, but it's going to be on the condition that you change to the German system."
No.
Yeah. And so you can imagine with the childhood and the upbringing I'd had, which
Yeah.
had, for me, it was completely normal that I played the French bassoon.
Mm-hmm.
And to suddenly get this type of feedback, I mean, now looking back, yeah, it was obviously a bit naive, but that was my upbringing up until that point.
Well,
So it was a bit. Yep.
it's my understanding that there's actually a pretty long history of playing the French bassoon in the UK. Is that true? I mean, maybe most of the orchestras switched, I think, just based on my own research, but the UK was a French bassoon playing country, isn't that right?
That's right. Yeah, absolutely. Probably later than a lot of other countries, the switch happened,
Right.
and into the well into the 1970s, we still had Cecil James, who was the last major seat holder in the UK, playing in the Philharmonia, and he was a friend of my father's as well, and so
Wow.
he was a big influence on him.
Mhm.
And yeah, there was definitely more of a tradition. One of the places I went to was the Royal Welsh College of Music and Drama in Cardiff, and my audition there was a completely different experience.
Good.
And the gentleman sitting on the panel was Jeremy Ward. I don't know if you've heard of him.
I don't think so, no.
But he did a lot of period bassoon playing on classical bassoons. He recorded the Mozart Grand Partita with the orchestra, the Age of Enlightenment, on period instruments. So he was already switched on to the history of the instrument, and so when somebody turned up playing the French bassoon, it was very exciting, I guess. So I really felt like they wanted me to come along, and we could sort of benefit from each other in a way. So
that's awesome. I love
yeah.
that. That's a nice happy ending.
Yeah.
Or beginning, I guess.
Yeah. So I ended up spending 4 years there, learning with Steve Marsden, the Welsh National Opera, and Bob Codd, the BBC National Orchestra of Wales. And it was quite interesting for myself, because up until that point I'd been taught by my father, who played the French bassoon, and now I was studying with professional players that were of the German system. But it never really was an issue, I guess, because by that point all the problems are kind of the same, really. And if you're, if you're playing the bassoon to that level, you are essentially a problem solver, aren't you? So, so whatever instrument you pick up, be it two different heckles that might be one serial number apart, and you can find a whole different array of problems to deal with. And I think it was really just finding somebody, a teacher with an open mind that would be willing to just sort of take me on board, and it was good fun. Yeah. And then I ended up getting a job in Haworths of London, the woodwind dealers,
Right. That's amazing.
as their bassoon specialist. So that's what made me move to London, and also got me back into the the music industry.
Cool.
And I worked there for, I think it was a couple of years. And very quickly I realized that I was on the wrong side of the counter. I was kind of there giving all the customers the benefit of my experience and knowledge, and without actually doing anything with it myself. So
Right.
I decided I needed, what I really wanted to do was get back into it. So I saved up and went and did a postgraduate at the Royal College of Music with Martin Gatt. So he'd always been a bit of a, let's say, a fan of my playing on the times I'd met him, and I felt like he'd be a good person to sort of, to help me onto the next stage.
That's great. And he was another German bassoonist that was receptive and,
Yes, yeah. But also he was of my father's generation, so he was of a time when he remembered Cecil James and other players of the French bassoon, and he really was a fan of it.
Had he ever played it? Like maybe he had started on it? 'Cause
Yeah,
I know a lot of like New Yorkers actually started on French bassoon.
I don't know his exact history with it, but I know he had one. He had one in the locker at the Royal College of Music that he brought out every now and again. But it was a bit like that. But no, it was a great year that I had with him. Then ended up playing principal bassoon in the New Queen's Hall Orchestra, which you may not have heard of, because I think it's basically defunct now. But it was set up with the idea of having an orchestra that sounded the same as an orchestra would have done 100 years ago. So they played on period instruments, but not from the time the music was written. It was sort of from the time where the Queen's Hall Orchestra was in its heyday, kind of thing. And the beginning of the proms and all of that stuff. Mm-hmm. The bassoon section was myself and Claire Adams, who, going back to that photo of my childhood local amateur orchestra with the four of us, she was one of the other ones. So we linked up later in life again.
That's great. That's amazing. And so presumably she was playing French bassoon also, or okay, that's great.
Yeah. I ended up doing a trial for the associate principal of the Orchestra of the Age of Enlightenment, which I had to learn the heckle system for that, because they wanted somebody who could play both systems. Right. And everybody else that was going for the job was coming from the other side. So, I thought, well, why don't I give it a go as well? I wouldn't mind actually starting by reading the sleeve note that's on the LP that I've got. It's written by Françaix himself. It's only very short. It says, the first movement of this concerto was originally a piece of examination for the Conservatoire of Paris. Maurice Allard, the famous bassoonist, asked me to write it for his students, having at the back of his mind the hope that I would add a suite in order to raise it to the high rank of a concerto, which I did without requiring too much pressure, because I love the bassoon, this cello of the winds, as authentic in tenderness as in nostalgia, with in addition a cheering, somewhat commedia dell'arte fashion. Let bassoonists forgive me, I do not leave them a leg to stand on. With the help of the wonderful manufacturing of French instruments, however, finally they will love it.
Wow, that's fantastic.
Obviously, amazing technique. But what really stands out to me is the energy of his sound. Not just the sound itself, but even the short notes, the staccatos. And it's not, for me, it's not the front of the note. It's what comes after it. And I think the best way to describe it is as having fizz in the sound. You know, and you can almost hear his abdominal muscles giving that fizz to the sound. And I think it's absolutely wonderful.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, that's we talked a little bit before, but just like the physicality of the French bassoon and how much you have to really blow into it is great for notes like that for staccatos, because it's just, I try to get my students on German bassoon to do that. They don't understand that pressure because the German bassoon doesn't really require it. I mean, it does, but not to the extent that the French bassoon does. So, and
it's just energy, isn't it? And the whole thing sort of breathes of excitement. If I mean, fantastic composition aside, that obviously helps the performance, but the interpretation of it and just taking that to the next level.
Yeah, and you can really hear that it's one of the test pieces, a concours piece, because it's one of those requirements is that they extend sort of the range, and it's very technical, and it's just within a couple beats, it's leaping humongous octaves like throughout the instrument, which is, I think, makes it sound so fun and so Français.
And his bottom C is absolutely as clear as the top one, and it's, it's if you get a modern like computer software program for writing music, and you have a note, and then you just pitch shift it up 2 octaves, it's like he's done that. There's no change. I think it sounds absolutely fantastic.
Yeah, it's so refined. It's so perfect. I love it too.
Yeah, so the thing I love about this section in this recording is that I don't think it could be anybody else playing it. It's
True.
For me, the thing about his sound that I enjoy so much is this particular register from, say C3 up to F and G and A. I suppose you call it the tenor, probably more into the alto register. And for me, this is it's unmistakable Gilbert territory. But there's something about the French bassoon that can cut through the texture or sort of hold its own. It's very difficult to describe the sound.
Maybe that there's like to me, even though Gilbert plays with like a very dark sound, like it has a clarity sort of at the core that maybe, especially like maybe a German system bassoonist would have, maybe muffled is too negative of a word, but it still has with French bassoon and Gilbert, like it's very direct and focused, but like clear at the same time.
It's always centered, the sound.
Yeah. But yeah, isn't that adorable? It's just like so typical Françaix to just be like, and it disappears at the end.
Absolutely, and it actually gets me emotionally. Like I don't know if that was the effect that he was going for, but that's the effect it has on me. And I actually almost feel like crying when I listen to it at the end there,
I
because
know.
yeah, it's just like it's so good, and for me, like it's never been matched, and it's sort of just it's just such a pleasure to listen to it.
It's
It's almost like you can enjoy it more when it's finished than when it's actually happening. That yeah. If I could tell you how many hours I've spent with that page up on the music stand, like trying to nail those passages, it's just insane.
Oh, it's unbelievable writing. I mean, he must have
Mm.
just maybe he was taking out some anger on Allard.
Yeah.
Or maybe trying to push him to his limits because he knew he was so good. I don't know.
I mean,
But
each group in itself is actually technically not that difficult to play on a buffet bassoon, but when you put more than one group together, it's having the mental capacity to be able to think on that level, whilst
right.
you're executing,
It's like the first statement of that is just crazy enough, like, because of the register leaps. It's
Yeah.
just so virtuosic, and it's like, how dare you, Francais?
Right.
Like,
For me, it didn't stand out so much when I heard it as when I tried to play it, um, and, and I got it on the page, and I was like, "Sorry, you want me to play what?"
exactly.
And I remember just laughing at the music on the page, just laughing at the notes in front of me, and I was like, "That's exactly what Françaix was doing when he wrote it." He was like, "I'm just gonna, have a laugh at everyone's expense." But it's such a trip down memory lane for me, with all the, like I say, listening to it in the car when I was a kid on holiday and stuff, and singing along, and then trying to bash my way through it myself, and yeah.
Thank you so much, Howard, for taking the time to talk to me. It was a great pleasure.
Absolutely. Thanks, Darren.